All right, good evening, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. That sounds like there's 3 people in the room. I have seen more live from a dead donkey. So I'm going to need to see a bit more from all of you. There's plenty of free drinks and food outside. So one more time, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you. That sounds so much better. Thank you so much. This sounds like there's life and there's people in the room. There's a lot more people joining us online. My name is Larry Madowo. I'm tech editor for NTV Kenya, and I'm excited to be leading this conversation, which is such an important one. And I think it is possibly one of the few times it is happening on the World Economic Forum stage. It is about empowering Africa's digital disruptors. And I've been covering this scene for maybe much of the last decade. And if you look at all of the work that's happening here, it's fantastic. And in a bit, you'll hear from some ladies in the audience that are sitting here at the front who are doing incredible things in technology, and they're entrepreneurs that the World Economic Forum identified. I'll introduce them to you a little later. But I want to tell you a story. Maybe a year and a half or 2 ago, the Central Bank of Kenya, where I live, they put out a big press release and said Bitcoin is an unregulated currency and we don't encourage anybody to be working here. And what that eventually did is that there were maybe 2 or 3 Bitcoin startups that became illegal. So they shut down. And those that didn't shut down ended up moving to a different country. So you see that often the pace of regulation is not as fast as the technological advancement that's happening even on the continent. So that's one of the topics I want to discuss here. Please help me welcome my guests. First of all, in my immediate left is Lindiwe Zulu. She is the first Minister for Small Business Development in South Africa. Big round of applause for her. Thank you so much, Minister. I know you've had a big, busy day and you're still joining us here. Next to her is Caroline Atkinson. She's the head of global policy at Google. Thank you for coming all the way. Thank you so much. And last but not least, we've got also Kevin Taylor. He's president of Asia Pacific, Middle East, Africa, and Turkey at BT. Thank you for being here tonight as well. All right, so like I mentioned, the rate of technological change in the 4th industrial revolution is far outpacing the rate of regulatory adaptation. So what we want to talk about over the next maybe 50 minutes or so is how can Africa develop an enabling ecosystem that helps startup entrepreneurs, micro, small, and medium enterprises to thrive in regional markets and global supply chains. And Minister, because you're from government, I'll give you the first chance to kind of paint the picture for us.
Well, the first and most important thing is to understand the fact that technology is moving at such a fast pace that we are compelled and we will be forced as different governments, both in the African continent and abroad, but in the African continent in particular, to keep up to the pace because it's so moving so fast and furious. You can't run away from that. However, having said that, being countries that are still developing, there must be an understanding of the fact that what is happening elsewhere and the fast pace that is happening elsewhere, it has sort of like left many of the African countries behind, but that does not necessarily mean that if we've been left behind, we have to go through almost everything that we have gone through. It means that we must leapfrog some of the processes that have happened. However, the challenge also is the fact that there's regulatory environment that we need to think about. There's laws that have to be passed, and it must never be understood that the laws that have to be passed, they have to be passed because we want to close and hold the space from people from advancing. The fact of the matter is that we carry the interests of generations of people, for instance, in the South African context, who were left out of that process. And therefore, while you want to leapfrog, you also need to take into consideration the education as far as the people that are now coming into the space is concerned. At the same time, you also have to make sure that you create a regulatory environment that's not for you as government, but it's a regulatory environment that also protects the very same people out there. So you cannot be passing regulation that really holds people in a way that they can't move. I mean, you were just making an example of companies that had to leave the space because I suspect there was not proper dialogue
Right.
between the companies and the government, and that for me speaks to government institutions being strong, first and foremost, in order for them to be able to be trusted by the people. Here in South Africa, we've got very independent institutions of governance, from parliament to the judiciary to the executive. At the end of the day, we're all looking at creating a conducive environment, even for the digital leapfrog that you are seeing globally. And we're saying, how do we bring that into the South African context in such a way that it's something that's understood in the schools? Don't forget that we are talking about redressing the imbalances of the past, where education, the majority of the people that are now in a better space were not in a better position. So there's got to be a balance between the issue of regulation, laws, and everything, and the fact that technology is moving very fast. But we can't be left behind in the world space. Thank you.
All right, we can't be left behind. Obviously, somebody at the center of all of that is Google. Caroline.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me here. I'm thrilled to be in South Africa and at the WEF with a Google hat on, because I used to be on the other, we talked about the other side. I used to work for the government. No, exactly.
Minister Lindiwe does not like the fact that I told her she used to be in government and now she's on the other side. And Minister was like, no, what do you mean the other side? We're all on the same side. Yeah. But Caroline used to be Deputy National Security Advisor for the Obama administration.
So anyway, at Google, I have to say that first off, we are very committed to Africa, because for two reasons. One is, our ethos is to, and the founder's idea was to provide information, make it accessible to everyone in the world. And that includes, of course, the many people in Africa. And then, from a business point of view, for us, Africa is obviously an enormous future market. And it's one where we believe that there can be a digital transformation and an unlocking, as the minister said. But there are a couple of conditions. One is, as you mentioned, education. And on that, we are working, and many others in the field are working on providing digital skills. And digital skills can be for the app, the tech startup. It can be for the next generation in schools. And it can also be for the small businesses that the minister here is trying to work with in South Africa. Because many businesses are able, if they get online, to find new markets, to find new ideas, and find new customers. And that is something that supports a strong ecosystem, that allows for the development both of companies like Google, but also for the development of societies and the digital transformation. And finally, I just want to say that I really loved what the minister said about the dialogue, because there is a natural tendency for policymakers to be thinking about how to fix a problem or how to reach a certain goal and protect people. And in this space where things are moving so rapidly, it is important to continue to discuss with industry to see whether industry can help to regulate itself on some areas. Because a company like ours really depends on trust and a belief in the safety of people that use Google products online. So it's in our business interests to be that reliable service. And it's in our business interest to work with regulators to provide a supportive environment, not like the little story that you began with. Thank you.
All right, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing for me is definitely around digital transformation. I mean, we've got digital customer, digital consumer, digital people. We have huge technologies rolling out. You know, obviously, mobiles rolled out many, many years ago, 4G, 5G, but some very interesting technology, whether it be drone technology, humanoid robotics, obviously automated cars, which Google will be completely across. So we're seeing just huge technology changes. And if you look at the history of innovation, I don't know how many will remember this. I certainly do, and I think one or two in the front will remember Japan was a great innovator. I don't know how many people had Sony Walkmans. I see some probably won't have even heard of it, but...
there are people in the audience who are wondering, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
How many people know what a Sony Walkman is? How many people had one?
Many years
Oh,
ago.
you all are very old. Kevin.
Fantastic. So Japan was a great innovator. Korea copied Japan, and then Korea became the next great innovator in the Asia region, which is really, really interesting. In terms of Korea's development, that really just, and you see Samsung's developed out of that, etc. But then China started to copy Korea. And then China, when I was there first there 20 odd years ago, I just got a sense that the place was going to leapfrog in terms of technology and become one of the world's great innovators. And I think today, where you got WeChat or Alipay, they're an incredible innovator. You've got great companies like Huawei, ZTE, and in some areas they're absolutely leading the way in terms of innovation. My sense is, linking this back to Africa, is these technologies are absolutely going to get adopted in Africa. I was asked today why they're going to get adopted. 15 years ago, who had a mobile, and now everyone has a mobile. So my sense is that if Africa embraces the technology, creates a lot of SMEs around it, and becomes the next innovator, I think it's going to have a fantastic, an amazing future. So let's look at examples where that's happened. You talked about Kenya. Kenya is the fastest growing, as far as I'm concerned, the fastest growing arena today in terms of technology, and it's getting the benefit of that in terms of growth. I believe light touch and agile government and supportive government is really, really important, but I also believe passionately that education and STEM plus tech literacy is absolutely needed alongside this to ensure that innovation can happen in Africa. It was incredible today, when I had a chat, I don't know if Reuters are here, but they were talking about how they put together in Africa a Know Your Customer module as part of their technology. And within that, a number of banks came together to get cost benefit, operational benefit, in terms of coming together and providing a more effective Know Your Customer process. They also said to me, this module and this technology developed here in Africa is now going to be looked at in other areas of Reuters across the world, Thomson Reuters. And I think, that's just a simple example of how innovation can really, really work. And then you look at, the financial sector. 340 million people in Africa don't have access to financial services. 300 million people are registered with mobile providers in terms of payments. So, there's an incredible opportunity to really use mobility to really, bring Africa forward. I also see that, there's something like 2.26 million mobile agents. There's only 1.18 million ATMs. There's only 500,000 banks in the region. So, innovation is there and it's ready to happen. And I really feel passionate that the SMEs and supportive of SMEs with the right, if you like, digital learnings, can really just re-engineer and take Africa into an amazing place. An amazing place it already is, but I think it really can become an innovator downstream.
Okay, and that's precisely what the minister was talking about, the need to leapfrog, right? We don't have to go through the same development process that other countries took 10, 20 years to get to where they are. Exactly. But how do you create an environment that has, when you say conducive environment, that's almost a cliche in Africa among governments and regulators, right? Because that seems nice to put in a strategic report or whatever in speeches, but then does it actually happen on the ground? How do you make sure that you're supporting people so that an entrepreneur growing out of South Africa can access a global market? They're not hampered from here.
You really have to develop that ecosystem, whether we like it or we don't like it. The bottom line is that if you don't have a system that can be able to assist you in ensuring that the interventions that you have to put in place, they speak to the needs of the people, not your need as a minister or as a government entity. And my view, when we talk about ecosystem, is about systems in different places, in different countries that respond to the different needs of different, even though when you look at small and medium enterprises and entrepreneurship in the African continent, I would like to say that many of them almost face one and the same thing. It's usually issues of lack of access to resources, lack of access to information, because for me, some say, no, information is there, you can go and access that information. But for you to be able to access that information, you've got to be at a level of having the capacity to analyze that information that you get. Otherwise, you can just see the information going through. So the ecosystem, depending on different countries, is important because that's what helps you. And in the South African context, you can look at it from a point that there's legislation, there's regulation, but what are the real needs of small and medium enterprises? Speak to their needs. So when you develop a system that is there to support them, you've got to be able to put yourself in their own shoes and think about them on day-to-day basis. That's why I always say I'm a Minister of Small Business Development, but in the South African context, I'm almost like an activist for SMMEs, because one, in my own government, my responsibility is to make sure that everyone in my space understands the importance of small and medium enterprises today, but also understands innovation for them so that whatever programs are in government by different departments, there's a common understanding. Then at the same time, when I get out of there, I have to be an activist for them from a point of view of getting business to really understand from the South African context that if you don't support small and medium enterprises, the chances of economic growth and the chances of economic empowerment for black people in particular, for women and youth, will be lost in the process. So the ecosystem remains important because it guides us into, are we doing the right thing for the SMMEs, but of course being informed by their real needs, not about what we think.
So what you do is equally important also not just for small businesses as a whole where you're an activist, but also for the minorities you mentioned, black people, women, etc., who would otherwise not be included at all.
No, absolutely, because one of the things that we have to talk about from a South African perspective is that under normal circumstances, we wouldn't be having the language that we have right now. But we are addressing imbalances of the past of 300 years of subjugation, segregation, and exclusion from the economy of your own country. And therefore, even when we talk about the regulation and legislation and all that, unfortunately for us, it has to take into consideration that. Otherwise, why did we have to have legislation or regulation that deal with black economic empowerment? We wouldn't have had to do that had there been a common understanding by all that to bring the rest of the people who were excluded from the economy cannot be a responsibility of government alone. It is a responsibility of all, including business. And we are aware of the fact that business is there because they want to do the profits. Investors are here because they want to an environment where they are confident that their investment will yield returns. But we are saying, understanding that there is something else that cannot be lost in the process. That is bringing those people who were left out of this whole process into the mainstream of the economy. It's good for big business itself too. It's good for everybody, but it's also good for big business because at the bottom end of it all, or the bottom line, if I can use that language, is peace, security, and stability. And if you don't address the issues of poverty, inequality, and unemployment, you can try and make as much business as you want, but ultimately, if you don't deal with those issues at the bottom, you will face a problem, big as you might be.
Okay, Caroline, at the center of this conversation is, if a company that were to end up being Google were starting in Africa today, what kind of environment would it need? What kind of support is necessary to grow an African company out of this continent into the scale of Google?
Well, that's one question, and I think what's necessary there is to have a kind of openness to innovation, an openness to ideas, and a very strong education system. But I also think that you don't have to aspire just to have a Google. What you can do with internet availability is precisely the kind of thing that the minister pointed to the importance of. Anybody, anywhere, if they have access to the internet, can find out about all sorts of things and they can find a market, if they're a small business, to sell their goods to others. And there's research that small businesses that are online are much more likely to be highly profitable than small businesses that are not online. But it's understandable that a small business may not know how to do a website, how to become online. So providing those digital skills is really important. That's an important part of the environment. And another part of the environment that's important is providing the ability to access the internet. So you need to have connectivity. You need to have connectivity in a way that is accessible to people, that is not too expensive. And those are crucial for the young entrepreneurs. I visited a tech hub yesterday in Johannesburg, where people were thinking how to use the proximity of WITS in the city to provide research and hot desking, as they call it, for young entrepreneurs, and bringing together the ability to get online with the skills that, with teaching the skills is what you really need.
All right. If you talk about the digital transformation, Kevin, in Africa from Africa 1.0 to Africa 2.0, 4.0, there's a whole thread in there that's missing, and that's so important, right? That's necessary to get where we need to be.
Sorry, repeat that.
Sorry, you're talking about the digital transformation that's happening, and that needs to happen, that Africa potentially can tap into. Yeah. But before getting there, there's a whole crop of entrepreneurs that need to be empowered. There's an ecosystem that needs to be built. There's an environment that needs to grow them.
Yeah, I think if you look today, ecosystems are naturally being built. You know, my sense is that I passionately believe in government supporting innovation. I passionately believe that education and support of education is massively assisted by government. Although, you know, from a personal perspective, I think young people and SMEs have their own innovation. I mean, it's quite interesting in Africa that we did something with a soft drinks provider in terms of vendors across Africa, and every one of those soft drinks machines is now Wi-Fi enabled, and what's great about it is become the center for some of the communities. It means people can have natural access to internet. They can start running their own businesses. It's actually helped the soft drinks provider as well. They sell more soft drinks. But, you know, to me, you know, I've seen so many disasters by government when they interfere. I mean, probably one of the worst cases. Is there any Australians in here? Yeah, no Australians, right? So, you know, Australia tried to create a national broadband network and spend tens and tens of billions of dollars running that from a government across Australia. The point being, it's now really, really expensive to get government-enabled internet. It'll never pay back. You know, you've got to let commercial organizations, private organizations, and regulate private organizations, as BT has been, to ensure that we can provide the technologies across countries, in our case, the UK. And, you know, technology is available not at the cost of the taxpayer. And I think that's really, really important. So those are things that they can be done. If you look at the UK now, we have hundreds and hundreds of competitors because it was an open market. And there's an independent last mile access company, as there is here in South Africa. And that's a really good thing from the government, to give everyone the same access to create competition, create SMEs, etc. So I think, you know, really exciting.
I was just going to say that I think that there is a lot that that the young people and entrepreneurs and people who might, you know, be in a rural area that they can do by themselves. And if they're given the environment and the tools, they don't need necessarily to have the opportunity pointed out. They can figure out what they see as missing and maybe find a business case to supply it.
I think the other thing that's really damaging for SMEs is they don't get paid on time.
That's a big problem because...
And governments really can do, if companies, big companies aren't paying SMEs, they take SMEs under. So it really does need to be, potentially, that's where government can play a part. That there's an expectation that SMEs get paid on time.
Right.
Because you've seen so many SMEs fold because they're not paid, they don't get their cash for the services that they've already provided, and I feel passionate about that.
Yeah, well, I think you're talking about people in rural areas creating a conducive environment, but in the South African context again, you've got to take into consideration that people need to be assisted with the necessary tools for them to do that. You need to be able to understand the environment where they're in. Let me just make a simple example. Here in KwaZulu-Natal, I traveled from Richards Bay to a faraway place called KwaMhlabuyaLingana. And as I was traveling through, I was looking at the fact that there's tracks and tracks of plantations that are happening there. Within those communities, there are rural communities who are working in the plantations of they're planting trees for wood and whatever you, and then they've got pineapple, reams and reams of that. Now somebody would say, yeah, well, if there's communities that are living in that area, then they should be able to understand what's going on and they lift themselves up. They cannot be able to lift themselves up if the people who are owning those reams and reams of land, who are planting those trees, who are planting those pineapples, are not bringing the community into understanding that economy and not say, well, the people who are here, we have them, they must just be workers here. Now, if you have to deal with giving them the tools, it's got to be a partnership between ourselves and the private sector in saying, yes, it is true some of them are going to be your workers here, but it is true some of them can be turned into small and medium enterprises who would understand the value chain here and be able to take advantage of whatever opportunities are presenting themselves. But they will not be able to do that if they have very poor education, they don't have the information, they're not being given the tools. And giving the tools, I repeat again, cannot be just a responsibility of government alone. And that's not running away from government's own responsibility of doing that. Right. But the bottom line is that you need to be able to empower those people through education, through helping them understand the economy and what they can take advantage of in any given area.
All right. I wanted to introduce a tangent on this, which is of access and reinventing access to financial services. But yesterday at dinner, I remember a friend of mine was telling me, he's been here at WEF, and if he hears the word fintech one more time or inclusive growth, he's going to jump in and stab someone. So as we talk about this, look out for a man with a sharp pencil.
You don't want violence.
Pencil, that's not so bad.
That's not too bad, but listen.
Pencil can kill.
Well, a pencil can be very dangerous if used properly.
Or improperly.
Maybe not properly. Improperly.
Yes.
Yes, but financial services are so important, and especially in rural communities like you were talking about, in being able to get these people these people just banked. And I know the effect that M-Pesa had in Kenya for people that banks never even thought about, all of a sudden had access to banking on their phone, and that changed their lives in new and wonderful ways, whether it's just sending money to your grandmother in the rural village or being able to pay your farmhand or all of those different things. Is there more room to go from here? I want to start with Kevin in terms of financial services in Africa.
I mean, there's always models to look at. 47 out of 89 markets in Africa have got access to mobile payments. But what we really got to worry about is the other 340 million of people that don't have access. I was absolutely, once again, let's really look at BRICS and see what's happening and learn.
Right.
Yeah, we've got India there, we've got Russia there, we've got China there. Now, India did something quite amazing just a year ago, or 9 months ago, when it looked at the currencies and said, right, as from 4 weeks' time, all of these notes are invalid. Right, you have 4 weeks to take these notes and change for a new note, a new type of note, right? And the incredible thing is that all the money came out from under the beds Well, not only for under the beds, there was quite a few billion some people had above the beds, right? Well, because this currency was going to be invalid, so everyone came out. And obviously India also has quite a spread in terms of the population, you know, a billion population, and went to the bank to exchange their notes, but you couldn't just exchange a note, you had to set up a banking mechanism. So it's, you know, the economy just grew automatically overnight, that they didn't realize there was so much currency out there. That was just incredible, and it's been a huge success. So there's just a little bit of innovation there, of mind, that's created, that could take these 300 million people, not in one go, but maybe in one go.
Right.
But you just have to think about what would work for Africa. You know, I'm not someone that can come into Africa as an astronaut and just say, Africa should do this. Africa itself has to decide what to do. But I'm just giving examples of things that have worked to really take a population into technology. And that's been a huge success.
All right, I wonder if either of you want to jump in on financial services real quick before I take you to the audience. Minister.
Yes, absolutely. Again, I think I'm going to use the South African context that you have very few banks that really are the ones that decide on quite a lot of things. And then again, you see government coming in and saying, let us open up the space. That's from the private sector point of view, the banking solutions. And many of the banking solutions in South Africa, unfortunately for us, do not necessarily speak to your smallest and informal business. You know, informal business can hardly even walk into the door of any bank. And then you don't have alternative banks that would be able to look at people who were not bankable in the past and bank them today. So that is important. But you've also got your government development finance institutions who at the same time, government says, here are the institutions that you need to use, but we make it almost impossible for them because the kind of things that we are demanding from them are almost not very different from your private banks. So there needs to be transformation there. There needs to be a change there where we can have Women's Bank. If you go into the African continent, you find lots. In India, for instance, you're talking about India, you'd find that access to finance is made much more easy for your small enterprises, for your informal enterprises. And this is what we need to happen in South Africa so that we don't get to that point of monies being kept somewhere under beds and so forth, because it's useful for the banking solutions to also consider the majority who've been left out.
I think just to say that at the risk of having your friend come after me with a pencil, I think there is a lot of scope for, as Kevin pointed out, for more financial technology to reach the unbanked, the underbanked, the poorer, and more widely dispersed people. We were just chatting yesterday about why is it that M-Pesa took off so much in Kenya and not elsewhere. And one of the ministers I was talking to earlier today from Kenya said that, who had been a banker, that the central bank had been supportive in that case. And so that may also be an important element of, is the payment system one that is being supported in different countries, or are there a lot of restrictions which may be there for one reason or another that seems good that make it more difficult?
All right. That's an interesting history of M-Pesa. Considering the minister, I know the minister you talk about, Aden Mohammed, who's the Kenyan Minister of Trade and Industry, and he used to be a banker with Barclays, so his reading of that history, because some people might argue M-Pesa in Kenya developed in spite of the government, not because of it. But this year, the World Economic Forum had, for the second year, a search for Africa's youngest new female tech entrepreneurs, and they've got 3 of them in the audience here. I'd like you to give them a big round of applause, and I'll give them Thank you. The first chance, we'll get a mic to them so they can make the contributions. Please introduce yourself and what your company does, and then you can make your contribution.
So I'm Aisha Pando, and I'm a co-founder of a company called Sweep South. And what our company does is we're a tech platform that connects domestic workers in South Africa with homeowners who are looking for their services. So South Africa is a country that has a lot of domestic workers. We have over 1 million registered domestic workers for a population of over 50 million. And what we've done is use technology to try and connect those domestic workers with work in a very efficient and reliable way. And I just wanted to share the story of our company. So we launched just under 3 years ago. And when we launched in 2014, we had the real issue of whether both customers who were going to use our platform, but also domestic workers would be able to have access to this technology, because people needed to have some sort of a basic smartphone to be able to access the platform. And so when we launched, we had to buy people mobile phones, and that was part of our business plan, and we built it into our business plan. But we've gotten to a point where now, just over 2 years later, people are coming to our platform, over 80% of them with their own mobile phones. So the point is just that this happens by itself, and the market moves and it progresses. And if you're going with the trend, there isn't necessarily the need for government to step in that sense. But now the question has become less around access to the phones, but more about data, and data being extremely expensive. And I think that's maybe where government can assist, is now you're dealing with private companies, and we have networks in South Africa who are charging sometimes 3 times the amount in South Africa that they're charging, and these are South African networks charging 3 times the amount locally that they're charging international countries for the same amount of data. So I think maybe that's where government can also help, is when it comes to private companies, trying to encourage those companies as well, whether it's a carrot or a stick approach, but encouraging those companies to also help to facilitate entrepreneurship.
All right, Aisha, you almost started the hashtag data must fall one more time.
Yeah.
Get everybody going on it.
I was just writing down there that, you know, this is data must fall, because they've really been campaigning very much to make it cheaper. So
Absolutely.
because it's about access. If you make it more expensive, a domestic worker really now, how much does a domestic worker, and those companies are making a kill. The cost of a call that's falling and picking up that call is quite expensive. But I agree that government must then come in, because again, if you just say the markets will work it, it won't happen.
Okay.
Yes.
Angel Adelaja, please.
Thank you for having me. My name is Angel Adelaja. Our company is Fresh Direct Nigeria, and we are an ag tech company. We're using technology to promote urban farming so that we're producing vegetables that are hyper-local. We created a container farm technology where you have a stackable shipping container that we're growing inside of using hydroponics, aquaponic technology. And for us, in doing business in Nigeria, I think one of the biggest issues was really regulation on land use, for example, or access to land. So for many of the reason that we have our business is because a lot of youth don't own land. So if you don't own land, you don't get access to loans, because loans are based on landed property in Nigeria. Where you look at other countries where you can bring your cow, or your shipping container itself could be that collateral that you need to do to get a loan for yourself. And so for us, what we're trying to do now, the next step is to get the young people that we provide jobs to access to loans by us being the collateral. If we're able to off-take everything that they produce, then banks should be able to say, okay, I may not give them the loan on their own, but if they're backed by someone who is more credible and it makes economic sense and they're lowering the risks so there's no seasonality of the crops, there's no loss due to transportation, they can't really tell them any stories, then it makes sense for me to give this person an opportunity. It's one thing for Nigeria's central bank to put money into private banks and say, this is the women's fund, this is an SME fund, this is an agric fund. And then you ask how much of that fund has been drawn down by the people that they've actually intended for those things to go towards. I think another thing for us was concept of land use. In urban spaces, they didn't think of how agriculture can be part of the ecosystem in an urban area. For us, we're not taking jobs from rural farmers because we're farming things that are imported. So it would make sense for government to say, this makes sense, especially when the value of our currency continues to fall and we struggle with foreign exchange, then it makes sense for us to support ecosystems where food is also taken care of within the urban cities. But for us, the whole concept of using land for houses or using land for commercial properties, there's nothing that really says, okay, you can use this land for agriculture. And there's nothing that says, okay, you can put containers on this land and stack it 5 stories high. For the regulators, their interest is, how can I make money off of making sure she doesn't do that?
So it's not about supporting you, it's about just...
Yes, so the money will come
Okay.
if I'm able to employ people and I'm able to make sure that they are in the system, because most of the people I employ, either they don't have secondary school degrees, or they don't even have bank accounts, or they don't even have ID. So if government doesn't even know who its citizens are,
Okay.
then how are you even making money from them? So I think that thinking a bit differently about the banking system is also very important for us.
All right, thank you, Angel. And finally, Darlene.
Hi, I'm Darlene Menzies. I'm the CEO of a company called FinFind, and we're an online platform that basically matchmakes lenders with entrepreneurs. So USAID did a big research project in South Africa and found that one of the major problems is a lot of lenders, there's a lot of money to lend, but lenders are struggling to find the right businesses to lend to, and small businesses don't know who those lenders are. They know about the banks and maybe a few government grants, but often, as the minister said, the banks aren't the ones servicing that market. And there's over 200 lenders in the country, a lot of products available. So we've put a database together of the lenders that we keep up to date, and an entrepreneur comes in for free, and that's a lot to do with the partnership that we have with government. They come in, put their details in, and they get matched to a lender. But as far as policy is concerned for digital disruption, the two things I just wanted to highlight is, the one was, you know, I came out of a world where my folks believed that university was for Americans. It certainly wasn't for me back in '86. And so I went straight into the bank, and you know, I worked my way through the corporate world.
The bank was your university.
Yeah, essentially. But the point I wanted to make was, innovation is about problem solving. So I've become an entrepreneur to solve problems that I had when I started my business, like accounting system that I understand and access to finance. And I think in the education environment, it's not just STEM and the digital literacy, but it's also the way that school teaches you to think. We need creative thinkers, and we need problem solvers if we're going to solve some of the problems. The other thing, a big thing, is data. So for instance, we're asking government to change policy and program, but if government doesn't have data on small business, big data, you know, not you know, large volume, but also very deep in terms of how many fields of data you have on a business, how can you change policy? Because you don't know where the problems are. Are the problems in construction? Are they with, you know, businesses needing 100,000, a million? Where are they? And so we have a partnership with government where we're collecting the data and then we're handing it on to government so that they can actually use that data to guide policy. So I think data is very much connected to how Africa can solve its own problems.
Okay, thank you so much. Big round of applause for her as well. These are fantastic ideas, taking on some of Africa's challenges in new and exciting ways. I want to open it up to the audience. Just raise your hand, introduce yourself, and shoot.
I'm Ahmed Sheikha, Global Shaper, Alexandria Hub, Egypt. I have two questions. One question regarding the concept of trust. With banking systems, people look to banks sometimes that institutions trying to rip them off. And sometimes also you look to the government as another institution trying to rip them off with taxes. So if you want to ensure financial inclusion with new technological systems, how can you manage the concept of trust between these institutions and people?
All right.
The other question is regarding the middle management. We put great policies, we talk about great hopes with government and entrepreneurs, but when we come to reality, middle management usually in the government systems are not qualified, or they do not see the big picture, which faces lots of obstacles. So what are the steps, or what are the success stories that we can cascade policy to the lower levels of execution?
All right, I think I'll take one or two more and maybe see if after we've answered that we have room for a bit more. Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Liz Mwanga, and I'm a global shaper with the Nairobi Hub in Kenya, and I have a question about patenting. So because if you look at the World Intellectual Property Organization statistics, you'll find that Africa is not patenting as many innovations as possible. So I think I just want to understand from the Minister of South Africa, what is the government doing to be able to enable businesses to be able to take on that process in a shorter time frame, such that they're able to then even get investors who look at patenting as a big issue, as well as the businesses being able to protect their innovation.
Okay.
Then secondly, I have a question regarding businesses that are innovating and they get to a level where bigger companies want to acquire their technologies. So you'll find, like, for example, in Kenya, there are many entrepreneurs doing very great things, and you'll find that bigger companies want to buy them or to acquire these technologies. So I just want to understand, how can these businesses be able to be acquired and not feel shortchanged so that they can keep innovating within a bigger company? Because sometimes once the acquisition happens, a lot changes and the entrepreneur is not able to continue innovating in a company.
Or they get shut down. Can I take one more? Excellent. No, let's take these first. Quick fire answers so we can try to get through a few more questions. Caroline?
Thank you. So trust, I think, as I mentioned, is an incredibly important part of business. In banking, you mentioned, the questioner mentioned, but also in general in commerce.
Right.
And certainly online and on the internet. And I think that, I won't speak about how banks operate to develop trust. There are many different ways, but certainly for online companies, I think that there's a lot of transparency, and providing even more transparency about what you're doing, how you're doing, what is happening to users' data when they sign on online. All of that is an important way to build trust. Right. You also asked, or the other question about patents, and that was for the minister, and acquisition. It's an interesting question because I think that many innovative companies actually find, and many companies of any kind in any field, there is a difficult moment when there's a buyout, and how does the new management deal with the original entrepreneurs? Probably a lot of entrepreneurs find it more exciting to leave and start another company than to remain inside a larger one. That may be almost a cultural and risk-taking issue rather than something the government could affect.
Right. Okay, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's quite interesting. You know, you see new financial models being developed all the time. I personally feel that the traditional banks, unless they change, things will go to online banking much, much more. And you know, I feel that there has been trust lost with the economy, and you know, you see what happened just a few years ago when credit squeeze on small to medium-sized industry was devastating to small companies. So, you know, I personally think trust needs to be rebuilt in this space in a big way, and I personally think that online transactions is the way of the future. For sure. And you know, I mentioned mobile banking earlier on. You know, WeChat, you just literally, you know, put the you know, the sign on the product on you know, and you get paid. I mean, this is the way of the future, I think, in my view. In patents, we have 4,500 patents in BT. You know, we were an innovator in MPLS together with AT&T and Cisco. We've sold patents, and I'm not going to tell you which ones, into Apple. You know, we are inventing the next software, working alongside a couple of companies, inventing the next software-defined networking now. We can take, you know, we put 300 meg today down copper through our labs, through our 2,000 scientists that develop this. We're always looking at innovation. I think patents and the protection of patents is absolutely important, because people will start innovating and people just rip off their ideas. So just a couple of thoughts there. A few of the other questions here are probably best suited for the minister.
I wonder, he said they've got 4,500 patents at BT. I wonder how many African companies can say we have 100 patents. Is that a cultural problem here? How many people how many African companies are actively innovating and patenting that, or that culture just doesn't exist, Minister?
Well, from a South African perspective, it is a problem. And again, I'll go back to the issue of education, so that young people, for instance, who are in the innovation space today, many of whose ideas are being stolen or taken away from them because they do not have this experience, they do not even understand the regulatory environment of what we are talking about. So for me, it goes back to how do we empower our own people to even understand that the sooner you work on it and you believe it's something that's going to work, you need to be able to protect it so that it doesn't.
Okay.
Again, the problem here is you find that the resources are so not there. Most of the people with the innovation and the good ideas, they have to go somewhere to share the ideas and request for assistance in terms of building whatever they've managed to put together.
Okay.
And that's where, again, the trust is broken, because a lot of young people are saying, I'm sitting with my idea. I'm even afraid of taking my ideas to somebody who's sitting behind the desk in government, because I don't know whether that person that I'm sharing my idea with is going to take it and give it to somebody else.
Okay, and
so it is complicated, but I do think that first and foremost as government, we are very conscious of the fact that we need to be able to protect intellectual property. We must have systems in place that will enable people to have the confidence that when they have it, they can go and register, they can understand what that means. Legally also it becomes very complicated, because once they discover that somebody else has taken what they have, it's difficult for them to go about fighting for it, because it's very costly to go into that fight.
The gentleman from Egypt, Ahmed, said middle management in government, I think especially, doesn't seem to get it, right? So you might make great policies, but it gets lost, it's not trickling down. The people that are in charge of implementing it just are clueless.
The fact of the matter is that not everybody is a business person. You do need to have civil servants that are going to sit there and be able to analyze the environment and begin to say what are the things that we need to do to make it easy for people to do business. And I think it's got to be understood again, it is commitment. When you are sitting as a government official, you've got to think beyond yourself and the fact that you are here and government is paying you. You've got to think from a point of view that says you are still serving, and therefore when you are serving, you need to think about the people that you are serving and protect that. It's impossible to think that in the Department of Small Business Development, the only people that I can have are people that have had an experience in doing business and all that. That's why we use research. We make sure that we engage with the small and medium enterprises, so that by the time we're developing any policy that we need to develop, it's something that they feel very comfortable with. I would love, for instance, in my department, to make sure that I have people who have had an experience of what it is to start your business, what it is to grow your business, but in a real world, it just doesn't work like that.
Okay, I've got maybe just 3 minutes left. Is there a burning question before they make the closing remarks in 30 seconds each? I don't want to lock anybody out. Going once, going twice. All right, Angel, you got the last say.
My question was about ease of doing business, and of course when it comes to interaction with government. In a situation where an SME may not have access to certain corridors of government, but an international company comes in on their private jet, they get to meet the minister, and then it happens for them. When you're competing with that type of company,
you don't have the same level of access.
Exactly. So I feel like maybe if there's a level of transparency, if government digitizes, and then it evens out the playing field, then if I put in my application the same time this big company puts in its application, we can see where everybody's business is going, or where everybody's permit is going, and so we can better understand, and I think there's a level of trust to be built. I'm not sure about in South Africa, but in Nigeria, we had one of the lowest ratings for ease of doing business. So I want to hear a little bit of what can be done for those countries that may not have as good a rating to get to the level of other countries that have more important.
All right, as you make your closing remarks, Minister.
Yeah, well, I'd like to first thank the women that are sitting here. They're very young, they're very bright, and I look at them and I say, 30 years ago or so, I was right where they are, but I wasn't in this situation where I could easily come into a forum like this and begin to engage and be empowered, and I think we'd have to give them an applause, because I think they're in their space and they're doing the best that they can. And secondly, I'd like to say to them, they are the future. They need to carry the burden of succeeding, because if they don't succeed, it means the rest of the people that are coming behind them, and in particular women. And one of the reasons why as government and in my department we're looking at ensuring that women, youth and people with disability must be at the center of what we are doing, because if we create a conducive environment for them, they will fly. We have to listen to them because they're experiencing it on the ground. And I wouldn't like a situation like the woman from Nigeria is saying, that the access to ourselves as government is those people who come flying in their
the private jets, and they have immediate access. Yes.
That shouldn't be what guides us as government in as far as listening. Our responsibility is to listen to the felt needs of the most ordinary people, and if we do so, it means we must go down to the ground and begin to understand what is it that we need to do. Legislation needs to be there, regulation needs to be there, but it shouldn't be regulation that entangles them rather than making them succeed.
All right, so Kevin and Caroline, thank you so much. You will split the last minute between yourselves. Caroline.
Okay, very quickly, I fully support that idea of people flying, and especially the idea that the people who have been disadvantaged. And I think that the digital world can really help that, because it cuts the costs of reaching people and of spreading information and so on around. So I think that Africa has all the potential, and I hope that my company, other companies can be a part of helping you to realize that.
All right, and lastly, Kevin.
I just was, I think it's fantastic. What a great example of SMEs changing the world, and good luck with your businesses to the three of you. I just think that diversity in everything we do is absolutely key. I'm incredibly proud that my CEO in Japan has just been voted the 38th greatest leader in the world in Fortune magazine a few weeks ago. The Pope was number 2. Jamie Dimon was number 39 at JP Morgan. And that's Haruno Yoshida, who's a lady. And she is, really, if you think it's tough here, it's just as tough in Japan for lady leaders. And she is really transforming, not just from a BT perspective, but from a government perspective. She's the leading lady now in working in the business environment for the Japan government. And she's probably one of the 2 most famous women in Japan. It's fantastic. Also, my CEO in China is a woman, and I'm very proud of that. And to me, I'm not being funny, but I think women add incredible value, probably more value than any of my team. And you know what? I'd hate to do an all-man management team. My God, how boring that would be. So you've got to have diversity to have fun as well. And that to me is very, very important. So I think it's really good comments, Minister. I just think I feel passionate about this area. Anyway, so just in conclusion, thank you very much. Digital transformation's the way. And I can't wait to see the whole market move and see some great outcomes in terms of GDP growth across Africa going forward. Thank you.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. Please give a big round of applause to my panel, Kevin, Caroline, and Minister Lindiwe. And most of all, thank you for being here and for staying with us this evening. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.